a boom during this period, and the management of foreign exchange resources became necessary to ensure that shortages did not arise. However, the COVID-19 pandemic affected all spheres of life and all sectors of the economy globally, and by extension, all sources of foreign exchange for Nigeria. The worst hit was the oil sector, which saw oil prices fall below $0 per barrel owing to little or no demand. The current war between Ukraine and Russia raised the global price of crude oil, yet Nigeria seems to be immersed in a productivity crisis and thus could not leverage on the gains. According to the Central Bank of Nigeria's Governor, Godwin Emefiele, the dependence on oil alone to fund Nigeria's foreign exchange import obligations must stop. The naira is shrinking in value against the dollar in a rate that is alarming. The backlash on the country's economy and the common man is evident. Inflation rate is on the rise, and the effect can be less than imagined. Escalating Forex and implications on trade, income, and common man's economic stability will form the focus of our discourse today on the program. I'm now being joined via Zoom from the UK by a chartered financial analyst with cognitive experience in Forex trading, Mr. Emmanuel Aluku. Thank you for leading this conversation today.
Thank you. That was an excellent introduction of what has happened since 1962, for what you said. I learned a lot from that in itself. And,
all right, let's go quickly.
That's quite useful.
Okay, thank you. Russia and Ukraine have been in war for a while now, increasing global price of crude oil. Why is it that the exchange rate is not stable, notwithstanding the high crude oil prices occasioned by the war, among other factors?
Well, if you look at the exchange rate, actually, it has deteriorated before the war.
Okay.
So if you look at the way we manage our exchange rate in Nigeria, technically it's called some kind of a managed float arrangement, where we try to keep the exchange rate within certain bands. So the war in itself in Ukraine and COVID and all that hasn't necessarily done much damage to the exchange rate. The bigger issues right now globally is not really the exchange rate. What we've seen is dollar strength globally against almost all other currencies. And when we see dollar strength at a time like this, is what we call a flight to safety. So the dollar is strengthening against all other currencies, including the naira, but that has not shifted too much, if you ask me, if you see what I mean. So the biggest problem we have right now is not Forex, although that's always been a problem because the naira is weakening, and the expectation is over the years, it will keep weakening. But that is understandable because the biggest problem Nigeria has from a macroeconomic perspective is really inflation, which we're seeing right now. And the inflation is imported through the dollar strength to some extent, and the fact that we have to import a lot of things, that some of which we should not be importing. That's the bigger problem. And inflation hits the common man very, very badly. In fact, I say inflation is one of the biggest problems or the biggest bugbears that an economy can have. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria is aware of that, and there's a target interest rate level, inflation level of 6 to 9%, which has not been maintained for, let's say, the past 10 years, I would say. So the central bank has not been able to keep inflation within the level which they see as manageable to the average person, but even at levels of 6 to 9%, that I would say is even a bit too high, because unless your salaries or your wages or your income is increasing at above the level of inflation, you're getting poorer day on day. And that's a big challenge. So I don't know about you, unless you've earned about a 10% rise in your annual wage paid on time, you have been affording less and less year on year. Now, the inflation in Nigeria right now is at a level of about 17% and rising. And that's a global phenomenon. So people are really struggling, I would say, if they're having to deal with such inflation. Even people at the poor level of the income scale, they're dealing with food inflation about 18%, which is higher than the general inflation. And so there are problems, real problems, some of which then Forex related, but mostly inflation related.
Okay, you mentioned that Nigeria's biggest problem is inflation, and inflation rate is really high at the moment and keeps going higher. Do you think Nigeria is complacent about this problem, as it seems like not much is being done to drift towards production in order to reduce inflation?
Very good question. I think basic economics will tell you that if you want to have a strong economy, you must be productive and you must be able to export. Now, for you to be able to produce, you have to have certain infrastructure development and certain resources to do that. Some of which we have, actually. I think everyone in the country knows that we have to move away from where we are now to where we like to be, which is to be more productive. But as always, it's easier said than done. Now, we have resources that we can use to deploy whatever we get into other areas, but we've been very poor at that. Having oil as a resource that the world needs is a blessing to Nigeria rather than a curse. But it seems as if we have not been able to channel that blessing into the right areas, into maybe agriculture, which we have a lot of land to do so. We have a lot of cash crops and other crops that we can export. Cocoa, rubber, to name just a few. And more importantly, we also need to move into value-added products. For example, there is absolutely no reason for us to be importing fuel, which is kind of a very strange phenomenon that Nigeria has to deal with. Now, if you import fuel, you are probably paying global prices, which are high. So what we're doing is a bit illogical, to be fair. We have the natural resource, which we export a lot of it and earns a lot of our foreign reserves, and we import the value-added products. That should not be allowed at all. But for some reason, we have not been able to get that act together. So some of us who, my background was in the petroleum industry and the oil industry. Some of us are waiting and hoping for the day in which we will become not just an exporter of primary produce, all of which is one of them, but an exporter of value-added produce, such as refined petroleum products. And until we start to do things like that, we will not be able to break away from the cycle of a deteriorating naira, the forex issue which we started with, or inflation, which is another problem. Because the world is currently experiencing what I call an energy cost inflation. That's pretty much what it is. So if we're importing finished products, refined products, we're importing inflation. Now, I know for a fact that diesel prices have gone up, and I'm sure everybody kind of in Nigeria who has to run their generators on diesel know that prices have gone up sometimes twice, sometimes 2.5 times. And that is really debilitating for a business that is trying to run and has such costs for a productive business. So until we have this kind of thing solved, we're not going to be able to produce and compete globally. Although we have a local market, a lot of people that are consumers in Nigeria, but we don't have a rich market. So the way to progress the country really is to produce with an eye on the foreign market, the rest of the world. And as we get richer, as we export, then you have consumption increasing because you have more of a middle class and more people, a bigger middle class, which is shrinking in Nigeria today. This is what China has kind of done, in effect. A very massive population. They became the producers for the world, producing all kinds of goods and services for the rest of the world.